We are a safari operator and I've been guiding in the Zambezi Valley for over 30 years. And that's what we've spent our life doing. And how we got involved in the conservation side was, as Beth was saying, it was coincided with when she came on safari 5-6 years ago, that our warden of the park made a plea to all stakeholders for assistance to help in what was then an epidemic of elephant poaching. So from then we just started helping out and putting vehicles on the ground and started our anti-poaching work. And I'm sure everybody who is on this list, not everybody, but there are probably a good 75% of the people that are watching tonight are people who support us and who donate to Bush Life Conservancy, which then funds us on the ground. So that's our model. We're a safari operator, our guests come on safari and they learn about the conservation efforts and people donate to our cause. And we've grown from there. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is not so much on guiding or camp life, it's going to be about what we've done on the conservation side. So this is a map showing the Zambezi Valley in Zimbabwe. And if you look up in the top corner up here, where in green is Mana Pools. And then, so that's where we're based. We're based right up in here at the top of the W of the World Heritage Site. And the World Heritage Site is the dark shaded area here, including Mana Pools, Sapi, and Chawari. And then if you look at the bigger area, you'll see a much larger shaded area. And that's what is known as the Zambezi Biosphere Reserve. So Mana is part of a very large contiguous wildlife area. There's no fences and the wildlife can move as they wish, except down here where the little marker is now, that's where there's people. So outside of this shaded area, that's where the human fence line is. So once, like I mentioned, we were asked to help, and the problem was we were losing too many elephants and there was very little anybody could do about it. So this was back in 2015, and the problem had been going for a few years already. So in our area of operation, as it says here, we lost 40% of our elephant in over a 20-year period. The last count of elephant was done back in 2001, and then there was a count done in 2014 called the Great Elephant Census. And this area in here had 20,000 elephants, and in 2014 was down to 12,000 elephant. So over a 20-year period, that equates to more than an elephant a day. If you look at this area down here, there's even greater loss, and that's just evident of greater numbers of humans. There's lots of people living in this area, and there's a greater impact. Other areas of the country were less impacted. The total number of elephants still remains about 85,000, and it was 85,000 20 years ago. So that's pretty constant. It's the second largest elephant population in Africa. And some of our parks, like Bonrejour, for example, doubled their numbers in elephant. So in some places there were losses, some places there were gains, and in others like Wangyu National Park, for example, it was pretty static. So these two areas here were the most heavily hit. From that, there was a lot of stakeholders got together with national parks and worked on this National Elephant Management Plan. And Diane mentioned earlier that she was involved in that. She's also highly involved in conservation work, and I see other couple of names here, Richard Marsdorp being one from Zambezi Society. So there was a whole lot of stakeholders invited to this meeting, and it took a few days, and then what came out of it was what we call the Bible for our elephant management plan for the next 5 years. And that's what we ended up working towards over that period of time. So as we mentioned, 2014, 15, there were a lot of elephant being poached. And then as all the state, there was a group of stakeholders. It wasn't just us. We were one of many, but we managed to get that elephant poaching number down. And you see in 2018, it was way down. 2019, it was probably about a dozen, maybe less than a dozen of elephants shot in the whole Zambezi Valley. And then last year, despite Corona and the very little presence in the Zambezi Valley, most of the camps were closed most of the year. Then we managed to get a 0 poached elephant count in Monopools National Park, which has been a tremendous effort by everybody. And only 4 elephants poached valley-wide. So it's been a dramatic turnaround in a 5-year period where there's been intensive anti-poaching operations going on. So our main aim is to work with national parks. They're our primary partner, and we work with the rangers of Zimbabwe parks, whether they're the area manager, officer, or the boots on the ground ranger. And that's where we come in. We assist the rangers to get out there and do their job. They're able-bodied, willing people. The problem is a lack of resources. We have extremely difficult economic circumstances in this country, and that has had a major effect on conservation efforts. So one of the simplest things that we do is just provide food, especially with the economy being as bad as it is. You don't think just feeding people would be a conservation effort, but without food in his belly, a ranger can't go out there and walk days on end around the bush, tracking poachers down and keeping the area safe. So that was one of the first things that we stepped in and offered. Then obviously to get around, there was a lack of vehicles. So we have purchased a fleet of vehicles. Currently we have 10 vehicles operating on law enforcement duties, deploying rangers around the park. And our area of influence has grown from just Monopools to the adjacent areas, to the east, west, and also to the south of Monopools. So our area of operation is probably in the region of 5,000 square kilometers, maybe a bit more. So it's not, on that previous slide, it said there we did about 75,000 kilometers of driving around last year. And that requires a lot of repairs and maintenance. But we have a few mishaps also. We've had vehicles turned over going up mountainous roads, and we've had vehicles washed down rivers trying to cross to react to incursions. So it's not always just plain sailing on the roads there. So another area of our operation, we work in several different stations where we have different numbers or groups of ranger stations. So one of the places we work out of is called Savaru, and that's a reaction unit. And there's up to 20 rangers at any one time there. And their main role is to react to incursions. So they're not doing day-to-day patrols, patrolling that river one day and then another section the next day. They're waiting for somebody to come in and break the law and go and catch them. So, and we've done a lot of work with these guys, and over the years, you can see a lot of it requires going out into these mountainous areas and setting up rough camps in the bush and spending days out there, either setting up ambushes or preemptive strikes. We work also a lot with the intelligence people, and the information that we gather, especially this last year, in the last couple of years, in fact, where we get information and we're able to move the rangers into position to stop the poachers coming into the park. So we're not chasing them out the park, we're preventing them from coming in, which has been a huge advantage for us, and obviously that's what's really helped in keeping the poached elephant numbers down. So the Safari guys, most recently, one of our biggest issues is illegal gold panning. And the gold panners are not necessarily poaching a lot of animals. They are just creating havoc with the environment, trying to dig gold out the ground. But they also just chase animals away. They're encroaching on the habitat and keeping the animals away from where they would normally be. So, and we're talking about large numbers of people, in some instances over 1,000 people at a certain place trying to dig gold. So it's a major problem we have at the moment. And a lot of work and effort is going into that. We've arrested more recently up to 200 people, and over about it's been a little bit over a year. We started in late 2019, chasing gold panners out. They come back, but the thing we're concerned about is that if we don't chase them out, they're going to build homes there. They're already building structures and getting quite entrenched. So we want to keep them on their toes and try to eventually give them enough pressure as they move out. One of the other areas where we've been successful in reducing poached numbers of elephants is setting up remote bases. So we just put up 2-3 tents in an area, and these are normally areas where we've come across carcasses, poached elephant, and it's a hotspot area, or it was a hotspot area, and we've put the tents up and base a vehicle and 3 or 4 rangers there and do the patrols based out of these remote areas. And that's had a big influence. Obviously, poachers do learn where the camps are, but the rangers do patrol quite a large radius from those bases. So it does have a large footprint around the base where poachers are obviously not going to try to get there, because the shot will be heard or their presence will be detected somehow or other. So they're very simple, pretty rough structures. One or two of them actually want to build into more permanent structures, that's a project on the cards at the moment. But otherwise, they're pretty simple. Just keep the shade on people during the hot season, and a shelter from the rain at this time of year. So to be able to do this, driving around, deploying rangers and getting around the park, we need to do quite a bit of roadworks, and we've been doing roadworks now since we started 5-6 years ago. And not only does it help us get around, but if we spend a month or two out there with a gang of 10-15 laborers and an armed ranger or two to monitor what we're doing and to keep the rangers safe, then that's an added presence in the area. So everything we do just keeps on adding a little bit of presence to the area, and obviously keep poachers or other lawbreakers out of the park. So apart from the inland patrols that we've been doing, we also do some river patrols. We have a few boats. They're mostly small little boats, like you can see in the picture. They're just fishing boats, but they can take 3 or 4 guys comfortably up and down the river. So we patrol an area of about 100 kilometers east and west of our base, which is our safari camp in Monopools, and which is on the river. The main thing that the guys are patrolling for is to stop elephant poachers coming across the river. And they come across the river in these dugout canoes, and they're ferried across by the illegal fishermen. Illegal fishermen are making a living on the Zimbabwe side, which is illegal. And so our job is to chase them out. Sometimes we confiscate canoes, or we confiscate nets, and we destroy those and just discourage them from our side of the river. As long as they stay on the Zambian side, which is where they're coming from, then that's a different story. But these guys are largely responsible for the ferrying of elephant poachers across the river. So by keeping them away, we're adding extra protection. So I mentioned we're working with the investigations guys, and so a lot of the ivory that we've recovered, over 200 tusks, is mostly been from working with the intelligence people and setting up sting operations and catching guys trafficking the ivory. And that has been hugely successful. The officer that we've been working with was given a medal by the minister for the most number of arrests in that area, that category. And so he is been tremendous effort in the early years. Things have quietened and quite down. When we started, it was a bit like putting a dry mop in a wet puddle. You know, it was, we soaked up a lot of stuff, but things got a little bit quieter on that, or people have just got more clever. But some of the ivory was also taken away from poachers that had been shooting elephants on the ground, like the picture on the right there. That's all fresh ivory taken from 11 poachers that were on the border of Mana Pools a few years ago. But a lot of the ivory from the traffickers is not fresh out the park. It's all the ivory that might have been around a few years and people looking for an opportunity to sell it. So it's a mixture of both. So also with the intelligence, I mean, we started off just aiming at trying to curb the elephant problem, but one thing led to another, and we got involved with a lot of pangolin issues, and we managed to recover 25 live pangolins from traffickers, and those were rehabilitated in Harare and relocated back into the wild. That's just from our operation. I'm sure there were many other pangolins captured by other people in their operations, but it's great to, yeah, I mean, I think I've seen 4 or 5 live pangolin in 33 years of guiding, and we recovered 25 from poachers in 5 years. So, you know, we're very happy with that result. We'd like to get more, obviously. So another part of the investigations team is working on Lake Kariba, which is a little bit out of our area in Mana Pools, but we do support with the vehicle and operational costs and operations on Lake Kariba, where the guys have confiscated huge numbers of nets and illegal fishing rigs and confiscated them. So yeah, a lot of this illegal fishing going back to the dugout canoes on the Zambezi River, more on our side. You know, the river is quite an important part, a large part of tourism on the Zambezi River is fishing. And with these netters coming across with tiny little gill nets, taking out all size and age of fish, it can be really bad for the fishing industry or the tourism industry catching, and we do catch and release. So we're catching big fish or small fish, we put them back, the netting takes everything out. So not only is it an illegal action, but we're trying to promote the fishing tourism business also. Something happened a little over a year ago. This guy and a friend of his, two rangers were killed by poachers. They'd arrested 4 poachers and were taking them across Lake Kariba and to take them to jail, and they were murdered. And so we've been paying their wives a salary equivalent to their monthly salary for the last little over a year now. So that brings us into our community involvement, you know, not besides feeding rangers and that kind of stuff, which we look at as really a community thing. But we're also starting to do a lot of work with the community on the southern boundary of Mana Pools. So National Parks came up with this idea in 2019 that they wanted to initiate a new concept for parks, something that hadn't been done for over 40 years in the community bordering Mana. So it's been 18 months or so now, and it's something that we're trying to expand on and improve our relationship with the community, because in the last few years there's been a bit of antagonism between the community and the parks, especially when large numbers of elephants were being taken out. So some of the projects we're working on with the community are, well, if we go back to the previous picture, one of our biggest projects is try to get some water there. Some of the villages, the usual story, you got to walk 10 kilometers to get water, but you got to get there at 4 o'clock in the morning and get in a queue. And if you're lucky, the well doesn't run dry, and then you got to walk home with an empty bucket. So there's quite a few issues there, and we're working on some water relief projects in that area, and then just awareness campaigns and try to build up a relationship with the people whereby we build up an understanding and not encroach on each other. So another thing we've been working on with the community was, this only started about a year ago. This leopard in the picture here had killed 70 goats in last year alone, and so obviously was creating havoc with the people's livelihood, and we were asked to go in there and try to catch it. It took us about 2.5 months to eventually catch this leopard, baiting it daily for 2.5 months. So it was a long, big effort, but we managed to catch it. We collared it and we put it down into monopools. It did move back into the mountainous area, but it stayed away from the village, which was our main objective. So that cat was a previous stock killer, is no longer killing goats in the village. We had a similar story with this lioness. There was a pride that was harassing a couple of villages. Leopards tend to be more resident and hit the same sort of village time after time. The lions will move around and cover a much bigger area, so it can be harder to catch. You don't know where they're going to pop up. It might be 10, 20 k's apart from where they moved, where they were last time. So we managed to trap this one. Again, also took us a couple of weeks before we got a result, and she was put into Chiwori, and she's still there. So that was also, has been another success there. So it's not always a success. This lion has been a problem for several years, and the man in the picture there, who is our manager on the ground, we call him Freedom. You can call him Nkuleko Klungwani if you want, but everybody just calls him Freedom. So this lion, we tried to catch him. We spent 2 or 3 weeks trying to catch him, and he would never come back to a kill twice. He'd kill a cow, and then 2 days later kill a donkey in another village, and then we'd go set the trap up. Then he would move to another village, kill a cow there, and we just couldn't get him. So bearing in mind that he had already killed 2 people, and we couldn't get him, and he was really causing a lot of trouble and costing people a lot of money, we took the decision to take him out if we had the chance, and the opportunity presented itself, and Freedom had to destroy the animal. So it's not always a happy ending. Another result this week, which I don't have pictures of, there was a lady taken by a crocodile, and she was washing her clothes in a dam, and this crocodile had taken a couple of people already, but she was a 40-year-old lady. She had 5 kids, and so anyway, that crocodile also met a permanent ending. So human-wildlife conflict can be very problematic. Sometimes you have happy endings. We catch animals and we move them. Sometimes not so happy. We're working on another project with the elephants where we have some collars set up at the moment, and the crops are starting to grow, and the elephants have just started raiding the maize fields. So our plan is sometime during the middle of March is to get some collars on some elephants so we can have an early warning system so we let the villagers know if the elephants are coming back into the area. It's very intermittent, they might go away for a week or 10 days, and then they come back in for a few days. So it's hard to tell and to predict. But it's obviously quite difficult and expensive to catch an elephant and move them hundreds of kilometers away. So we're just going to put a collar on it and see if we can set up an early warning system and help people in that way. So these are just ways we're trying to create a friendly environment with our community bordering the park, and just build relationships, I suppose. So we also, last year we started a new project in the valley, calling it the Zambezi Valley Carnival Project. And last year we managed to get collars on 5 lions and 5 hyenas and a couple of leopards. And we also aim to get collars on cheetah. And next year we're going to be expanding the range of the project into the hunting areas surrounding monopools in Chiwori and Nyakasanga. So we'll be looking at getting collars on those animals as well as cheetah and wild dogs in those areas. So what we're trying to do is create opportunities for local research students to come in and get something substantial to work on. It's very, opportunities are quite difficult to come by to get any solid research topics. So by growing these parks research projects, we're hoping that we can, start building up stories and gathering scientific data on all these species. So if or when we need to make a management decision, then at least we've got the scientific data to back up those management decisions. We're also looking at bringing in some international students to work with the local students, but Corona has done its job there. That's all on hold until travel opens up. And we can start mixing some international students with our local students and just widen everybody's scope and give opportunities to a lot more people. So apart from the elephant management, we've been doing the carnivore collaring. We're doing some collaring of elephants for the past, since 2017. And initially it started as a protection program for the big iconic bulls like this guy here. This is Boswell. Anybody who's been to Mana, well, most people get a chance to see him, I guess, not everybody, but he's one of those bulls that stand up on his back legs and reaches for the acacia trees. And so we put a collar on him and several other big bulls. We've got 14 elephants collared at the moment. And so we monitor their movements, especially during the hunting season when they occasionally leave the park. And if there is an elephant hunt on, we alert the authorities. All the hunts, they're legal hunts. So there's a ranger on the back of the truck monitoring the whole thing and just let them know that there is a collared elephant in the area and to be aware of it. And when you do find a big elephant, double check it doesn't have a collar before you shoot it. It's not illegal to shoot a collared elephant, but most hunters are ethical and moral in that sense that they wouldn't shoot an iconic elephant like this. So it's worked well. We haven't had any of our iconic bulls shot since we put the collars on in 2017 to date, and let's hope that lasts. We've expanded the range now on request from national parks because we've been monitoring these big bulls for several years now. We know their movements and they seem to be well protected, but we're going to expand the collaring onto matriarchal herds throughout the valley, so we can build up a picture of where these elephants move. Iconic bulls actually don't move a hell of a lot. They're pretty sedentary within the park, and that's also tells a story that they're feeling the pressure from the boundary areas where there's hunting. So by changing now to the matriarchal herds where there's less hunting pressure, we're expecting to see larger movements of the herds, but that's still to be told when we download the data. So another big thing that we're working with, both obviously with the community, because these are the people cutting the trees down, and we've put up one of the remote bases we've recently put up is on the southern boundary of the park, and that has been paid off really well in the sense that we've been able to stop a lot of the illegal logging. Huge number of trees being cut down, and primarily for curing tobacco. Tobacco in Zimbabwe is a cash crop, and the size of the crop just keeps on growing. So the demand for firewood is just growing and growing. So there's a lot of responsibility from the international tobacco companies which are funding tobacco farming to get involved and help with this illegal logging. And like I say, just the presence of in particular our one camp has stopped it. We've had roads going down into the park, going 10, 15 kilometers into the national park, which we've managed to shut down. And so those areas which had few elephants in it, so now that the elephants are starting to expand when the poaching epidemic was high, the elephants were kind of like shrinking into the center of the park. Now they're doing the opposite. They're starting to reach out into the the peripheral zones of the park. And this is where they're encountering areas which are being logged. So if there's no trees and vegetation for the elephants to feed on, you're hampering their distribution also. So it's quite a major thing that we're looking at. Another little project which doesn't happen often, but I think it's a big confidence booster for the parks rangers. There's been lots of shooting programs going on. Zamsock, Richard Marsdorp, who's on here, has been involved with some of that. What we're doing here is we have some thermal imaging equipment, which we're trying to familiarize the rangers with. They know how to use their weapons. We're trying to familiarize them with this high-tech equipment. So that's really important stuff. If you're going in at night, shots have been heard and there's an elephant down and you're going in to try to react to that, and it's dark and you've got a thermal scope or on your rifle or even a handheld one, it gives you a huge advantage over the poacher who's walking in the dark. So these projects like this can really make a difference in a tight spot. So yeah, that's most of our conservation work wrapped up for you. And just, the reason why we're doing this is, like we mentioned with the cutting of the trees, we're here to conserve the habitat. That's our primary goal, is to stop people from encroaching into our wildlife areas and keep our habitat for the animals that we show you guys when you come on safari. Boswell and his entourage of female elephants and the wild dogs, both of which Mana Pools are very famous for. So that's our motivation, I suppose, is to be able to maintain this for ourselves. My children have been grown up in my safari camp, and I want them to have these experiences, and hopefully they'll continue the work that we're doing, both in the camp and in the conservation work. So we're looking at passing this on to future generations. And yeah, that's the end of my talk.
Thank you so much for that, Nick. It's always great to hear all the details of what Bushlife does. It's phenomenal what you've done. I have a couple questions. One, do the poachers ever use drones? I'm curious if that's come in. I know. And then my second question is, it seems that there are hunting areas adjacent to Mana Pools. I think I've heard that before. Is there any talk or any thought of giving at least a buffer zone between like the national park and the hunting zones?
Yeah, Dylan, I've never encountered we do have a drone. One of our donors gave us a drone a couple of years ago now, and we use that periodically. It's not always practical to use it, but we do use it. Unfortunately, we also crashed it. So now we're fixing it. But yeah, it can be a handy tool. But yeah, the hunting areas, they've always been there. In fact, Mana Pools was a hunting area, as was mentioned earlier by one of the guests here online. Mana was, in fact, my camp where I have Wundu camp. That was what was known as the old F camp, and that it was a hunting area. It was only in the 60s when it was made a national park. So slowly, it's like an evolution of, hunting has become kind of frowned upon a lot these days. There's been a lot of, I don't know how to say this. Hunting can be a useful conservation tool, but there's been a lot of controversy about it recently, and the hunting areas seem to be shrinking. So a lot of people are coming in now with the big bucks and leasing what were previous hunting areas and converting them to photographic safaris. And probably about 20% of the Zambezi Valley has gone that way. So there's two big areas, Sapi and Reefer, that have gone totally photographic with no hunting, and they were previously hunting for the last 50, 60 years. So there is a change to that, and there isn't a buffer zone. The hunting area is the buffer zone between the park, the hunting area, and then the people. So the hunting area is the buffer zone at this stage. So you're not having, if you didn't have those hunting areas as a buffer, people would be right on the edge of the park, for example. But you know what we're trying to do, or what the people who are leasing these areas out are doing, is creating, you know, instead of having people on the edge of the park, you're having people on the edge of the buffer zones, which are now photographic areas, which is having a big impact. And that I think is also contributing to, you know, trophy hunting doesn't wipe out animals. It's typically it's the poaching, the illegal hunting, that is what's so disastrous to an elephant population or any population. The trophy hunting or the controlled hunting is a very different picture, and it takes a very small offtake of animals. So it's not normally that what is causing a drop in elephant numbers, for example. It's the poaching.
Great, thank you, Nick. Neil Schuf has a question. His hand is raised. If you unmute. Go ahead, Neil. Trying to unmute. There you go.
There we are. Thanks, Paul. Hello, everyone. Nick, very inspirational, especially how you're dealing with the practical issues of wildlife community conflict. And a fantastic talk. I was just wondering, is there any cooperation coming from the Zambia side, especially the lower Zambezi National Park? Do you have any synergy there? And is your wildlife crossing to that park and then crossing back to Mana pools?
Yes, to both. There's been, in more recent years, a more and more collaboration between the two sides. And it's mostly, you know, because you're crossing international boundaries, it's not people like us on our anti-poaching side collaborating with an NGO on the other side. It's more governmental collaboration. So Zawa, the national parks on the Zambian side, collaborating with our Zim parks, and they are having an effect. There is a little bit of controversy because along the Zambezi River, most of the poaching there is coming from Zambia. So what ends up happening is the Zimbabweans are helping the Zambians to arrest Zambians. So it can be a bit of a tricky situation. Yeah, and the animals do cross the rivers. I mean, and all species do. In our wild dog research over the years, we've had dogs which were collared that swam across the Zambezi and came back and went back again and came back again. So they do cross the river. Lions do it frequently. Another lion project that was done many years ago showed that the lions cross frequently. And then more often in a drought situation, we get huge numbers of elephant crossing onto the Zambian side, and the buffalo will swim across too. So yeah, that's quite common, especially in very dry years. One year we saw a herd of elephant where we hardly ever saw elephant before, and there was a herd of over 800 on the Zambian side. And it was just, they had gone across from Zim because there was at that time lower density of elephants, and they'd gone across, and the Zambians were complaining like crazy about our elephants destroying the trees. So it does happen.
Thank you. Keep up the
Great,
good work.
thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah. Leslie Cornish has a question for you as well. You can go ahead and unmute yourself, Leslie. There you go.
Thank you very much. Really interesting talk. Thank you. The wild dogs have been having quite a lot of exposure. I mean, you've got a Dynasties poster behind you, and there's been a couple of books. I read that there's sort of well-meaning tourists have been hassling them because they've heard about them and they want to get close. Has that been an effect on them at all? Thanks.
Yeah, so yeah, we hosted the BBC when they did the Dynasties movie back in 2015 and 16, and that did really increase the popularity of the dogs in Mana. And yeah, we had to come up with some strategies to stop people from harassing the dogs. So, you know, most of the professional guys now in the park know the story. And if we see somebody behaving untoward, not that they're behaving untoward, but they're either getting too close or too fast, too close, or interfering with the dogs in any way. Typically what happens is you get too many people watching the dogs and you get them encircling, you've got the dogs in the middle and they're completely circled by people. So one thing that we've done there is come up with a code of conduct, and the dogs are given 3/4 of the circle and people are only allowed in one quadrant of the circle to observe the dogs. And so that gives the dogs a lot more opportunity to move away if they want to. So that's almost self-regulatory, and so if we see something like that happening, it's up to us to control it.
Great, Nick, thank you. Heike Henderson, you've got a question. Go ahead.
Yes, hi Nick. Thank you very much for this talk. I visited Mana a couple of years ago in your camp there, which was a great experience. And we are still in the process of gathering funds, of making a difference. So in fact, I have 2 questions. One is, I read that 2-3 years ago, there were elephants relocated to areas next to Mana by Hammersbach Rhino Force. I wonder if you know something about how they are doing these days, and if they are moving into Mana and how this is going. I mean, if not, then there's no information, but I was wondering about that. And the other thing is regarding Lower Zambezi National Park. You just said that animals are moving there. I was just reading last week that there is a copper mining project going on over there. And I was wondering how you see that, how you see the risks of that. Because I mean, these lions are cross-border moving populations, so that might have an impact, whatever happens there. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so first on the elephants, to an area called Rifa, which is the next area but one to Mana pools. So it's very close. And yes, some of those elephants have come into Mana pools. They've been spotted with their collars on. 13 elephant cows or matriarchs were collared, and their movements have been monitored. A lot of the time they stayed exactly where they were released for a long period of time. Some of them moved, like I say, down into the Mana side, even as far as on the Sapi boundary, probably as much as 100 kilometers from where they were released, which for an elephant is not really that far. But mostly they stayed pretty close to where they were released. Those elephants are quite notoriously aggressive, the elephants from the Southeast Lowveld. And there was an incident where one of them killed a villager and left the park area and went into the community. And so that was a bit of a disaster, but that's, the elephants in Zambezi Valley do kill people occasionally, but yeah, these elephants have a different attitude. And since then, the collars have been taken off and there's no more monitoring. So we don't really know where those elephants are anymore, but they've integrated into the population in the valley. And then on the copper mining, sorry, it's this came up a few years ago and it was put on the back burner or halted back then. And now we're all hearing that recently it's been put back on the cards and given permission to go ahead. My understanding is also it's not on the river, it's further back in the escarpment, but nevertheless, even if it's off the river area, it's still going to be a disaster environmentally. And we're obviously totally against that. And I know there's lots of outcry and there's quite a few petitions going around at the moment to be signed to try and get back there and stop it again.
Fantastic. All right, thank you. Andy Klee, you seem to have a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself if you don't mind.
I'm here. Nick, many thanks from here to you and all the rangers about putting in the hard yards for this. I'm an old soldier and I know that the work they're doing is not very glamorous and it's bloody hard, but it's massively important. So a heartfelt thanks from me, even miles away in another hemisphere. So thank you for that. Just a couple of questions, really. Really, I'm spending my life on Zoom looking around the world at things like this, and there seems to be some really good examples from Kenya of using things like anti-poaching dogs and attack dogs, and some ideas for education. I don't know if you've got time to sort of share best practice with other conservancies and things like that. And the final one was quickly just how do we donate? Is it through Bush Life Conservancy on the website there?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Yeah, so we've thought about dogs, and if we did do it, our model would probably be what they're doing in the South Luangwa. They've got a very successful program going there. We haven't got to that stage yet. And the problems being, which they've conquered in South Luangwa, is dogs being vulnerable to tsetse flies and sleeping sickness. And they've overcome that with vaccinations. I think it is just like prophylactics, and they're working very successfully. So it's something we've definitely thought of. We haven't really put much effort into trying to get that set up, but in other parts of the country, it's very successful, and they're doing a lot of good work. So possibly in the future, it's something that we would do. And then, yeah, the donation side through Bush Life Conservancy is the best way. There are internet links on that, or just look us up and give us an email from the website. And Beth, who did the introduction earlier, would be the lady to get in touch with you and let you know what to do.
Great. And Seville Reedmiller in the chat asked a question, basically, who's been funding the 5-year management plan for the elephants, and how sustainable is it? And is there further funding secured or needed? And I think you sort of touched on that, but I think it would be nice if you could address that.
Yeah, so I missed the end part, but yeah, the 5-year elephant management plan it's a national parks endorsed plan, and parks have their agenda and they're working towards it. But largely it is being facilitated by people like us and other NGOs working in the Zambezi Valley. And, as I say, we're one of many on the ground, and we've told you what we've done, and we're always looking at growing. We're always trying to expand operations and area of impact, so we can maintain our vigilance and our record that we've just had this year without elephant poaching. We want to maintain that. So yeah, that's going to be our main aim. I missed the end part of your question there, sorry.
Yeah, well, it was essentially about funding, and is it sustainable, and do you need more funding? And how would that funding be secured? So I suppose Andy's question also went to that, and how can people help if that's needed? Yeah.
So yeah, help's always needed. And for us, the more areas that we start getting involved with, we started off in Manapus, now we're operating in 4 different national parks, estate areas. And so mobility is the biggest thing. Buying boats and vehicles and employing the people to drive them and run them. That's our biggest expense. And so our fundraising drives, people always ask me, so what do you want this time? I just say, well, another vehicle would be nice, but so that's always tends to be our aim, yeah. And through Bush Life Conservancy, we don't have anything in the UK, unfortunately, but most of our guests do come from the States, and it was just a natural progression for us to set up the Bush Life Conservancy nonprofit in the States. So hopefully one day we'll get set up in the UK also.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Paul and Nick. My apologies. I see that Angus Begg came in, and sorry to interrupt. I would like to ask Angus to unmute and just briefly, before we carry on with the questions and answers, just share with us his coming talk, please, Angus, if you can accept, unmute, and just share with us. I could not provide enough information, so we're happy if you can just share with us. Thank you, Angus, you are live.
I don't want to hijack this. I came in to listen about monopools. Chris, what I say? What you want to just a brief
overview of what you're going to talk about? Yes, we normally,
okay.
but you're not hijacking. You were just late, so
Yeah,
if
okay.
you can just give us a brief overview. Thanks, Angus.
Yeah. I've been involved with Gorongosa National Park since about 2007. I produced a carte blanche documentary on it. I found it fascinating at the time, the whole concept of redefining national parks. Even though it had started in about 2003, when Greg Carr, the philanthropist and the backer behind what's called the Gorongosa Restoration Project, even though he'd started in about 2003, I came along 2007. I then got hold of some footage that had been shot by an old Natal Parks Board bloke who's now living, if he's still alive, in San Diego. And he made this footage available, black and white stuff. And so that hooked me in. And, John Wayne and his Hollywood set, they used to holiday there after being at the Polana in Maputo, Lorenzo Marx. Anyway, so I've stayed in touch with it throughout the years. And then I was offered like a media consultancy contract last year, which was really helpful in a time of COVID, because work had collapsed and I'd had to move up from Cape Town to Joburg. And so being deep in was fantastic. And seeing, because I've always had these questions, how it funds itself when you've got a philanthropist behind it, how sustainable are these things? So I've pretty much seen it for myself, and we'll be talking about that sort of stuff, how the two arms, they've got a trust, and then that funds the health, the school. Basically, it's about taking care of community. The now old theory, you look after community, they look after the wildlife. But it's how you do it that sort of counts. And watching it in action was fantastic. And I don't want to speak too much, otherwise I have nothing to say.
Thanks, Angus. All right, we check you out next week. Thanks for coming in.
Brilliant. Yeah. No, I wanted to come and listen. And actually, I can I ask a question of Nick while I'm here?
Yeah, well, you got the floor, and then after you, I think there's a lady who's got her hand up. All right, thanks.
Okay, Nick, I just wanted to ask how, Zimbabwe, there's always been that strange thing. You always think it's in a permanent state of collapse. And, I was there a few times sort of undercover and but that was 2008, and it was, I don't know if it was worse then or not. There was nothing in the shelves, that sort of thing. But how does the conservation, are you guys sort of left to do your own thing out there in the bush?
No, not at all. Everything we do has to be condoned by national parks. So, and that can be one of the snags that holds things up, is, you can't do anything without a permit or without consent. So, which at the end of the day, obviously parks want control. We're all operating in parks estate, so it's very much controlled. And, having said that, though, their resources are hugely lacking. And so as long as we're coming up with something useful, they're not going to turn it down.
Fantastic. I see that Suzanne has something to ask. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Suzanne.
Okay, yeah. Thanks, Nick, for your talk, and especially for the great work the whole team does. You mentioned an incident with a villager and an elephant. So I guess there is some elephant-human conflict in the area as well. And if so, do you have any experience, or if not, what's your opinion about the beehive fencing, which I think is used in Kenya?
Yeah, that's definitely something that we're looking at. around fields and around people's homes. Oops, just lost her.
No. All right. Yeah, we seem to
Anyway,
have lost
for everybody else, yeah, that is something that has worked in other places, is putting beehives around the fields and things like that. And it's something that we're hoping to get established in our area where we're working in the community.
Excellent. All right. Wouldn't be LCA Unlocking Nature Talk without Marty asking a question. So please, Marty, go ahead.
Marty, welcome back. Listening to you.
How's it, guys? Thanks very much for the talk. Did miss a little bit at the beginning, but thanks for letting me on. And the question I'm going to ask, and it's a difficult one because I don't want to get into politics, and I also don't want to get into being a bleeding heart liberal or anything like that. But I think one of the biggest problems that you guys face, and I think it's similar to most parks in Africa, but it just seems to be even more exacerbated by what you mentioned in the talk, is that the community are living in abject poverty. They are literally trying to just survive. I mean, when you were talking about illegal fishing boats, etc., I mean, those guys harvesting kapenta is like just for staple food. I don't think it's a big industry or something like that. It's hand to mouth food. And how do you see a future for this from a sustainability point of view? I mean, I understand it makes sense to have tourists coming in and fishing and paying lots of dollars, but if the community isn't benefiting, that's always the problem. I mean, well, I don't know. I don't know the answer. It's a question that just seems to be even more pronounced in the Zimbabwe arena with such abject poverty, and it's probably due to politics and economics. I don't know if you can answer the question.
Yeah, Marty, that's obviously a tricky question. But as in many instances, and you think subsistence poaching is going on, then that's fine. You can turn a blind eye to that kind of stuff. That's not a big issue. But very seldom there's a cash crop element involved in it. Not always, but in a large number of circumstances for sure. And like not just on the fishing side, but if we look at the boundary, our southern boundary, our northern boundary, we don't have any people except in the Zambian side. So that is an issue that we're dealing with. It's an international boundary issue with the Zambians, and that's why it's so much more difficult on that side. And the Zambians have access to the river in their side, but it's not enough for them to fish on their side. They're coming onto our side, which is all national parks control the state, and it's all set aside for recreation. That's how parks make their money. And so if parks can't make their money out of whatever activities that they're offering, then you're going to have fewer visitors, and you put the whole landscape in jeopardy. So, but it's not only that; it's on the southern part, like you say, with the tree cutting. Even people, that's on a commercial level, cutting trees down to cure tobacco, to sell the tobacco. And also in that area where we've just established a base fairly recently, the spring that we're camping near was known as the buffalo hunting area. Guys would go in there with dogs and spears and hunt buffalo, and it's not for subsistence; it's to dry the meat and take it to the city. Bushmeat always has a little bit extra to it than a cow or a goat. People pay a premium for it, and it definitely becomes, like I said, in so many cases, it becomes a commercial venture.
Yeah. Nick, Akimi Bagelman asked a question about could the petition against the copper mining be circulated to the talk attendees? Do you have a link or something that you could provide us with so that people interested in helping sign that petition could have access?
And then you can forward it to the group. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Anyone else with questions? Must be someone out there.
All right, Paul,
I see Angus has another question. Go ahead, Angus. And
I
then
did, yeah. Thanks, Paul. Nick, one other question. I produced another story on one of the first TV stories on the cyanide poisoning of the elephants in Wangi, 2012 or 13, whenever it was. Lower Zambezi, some pilots had said they'd seen bunches of carcasses on the Mozambican side, and coming over from Mozambique, going up from KwaZulu-Natal, Mozambique into Lower Zambezi. Do you hear of any of those sort of poisonings now and then? You hear of them. I've heard of a couple in South Africa when it's the bycatch, they go for everything else as well. But have you heard of those continuing?
Not continuing, no. The last incident we had with it was in 2016 on the southern boundary of Mana, where we lost 8 elephants and a pack of wild dogs, unfortunately. And that's what drove us to put our base where it is at the moment, one of our bases. And fantastic news, we've got elephants coming through the camp almost daily now, and we've got a pack of wild dogs hanging around the place. So, it's just maintaining that presence and keeping people out of there, and the wildlife will come back. But you're quite correct, on the Mozambique side, that was where the poisoning was most prevalent, and it did come into Zimbabwe on the eastern side there from the Mozambique boundary. And that's what's devastating. The guys who have those concessions there, talk to them, the numbers of animals they found poisoned by waterholes is quite unbelievable.
Very sad, yeah. Lynn, would you like to ask a question, Lynn Visser?
Hi, my question is purely practical. I love to take my car up from Cape Town and drive into Africa and camp and just experience, really living in Africa and watching and being. And how safe is it? Because I would love to drive up to Mana. How safe is it for a woman with maybe another woman or two to come and drive up and go camping?
If you can make it through South Africa to the Zim border and get into Zim, you'll be fine.
Lynn, you got your answer. Got to go. You can get to Messina, you can go.
Yeah.
Sorry, Lynn, just unmute again, please. You are just muted.
Yeah, I would go up through Namibia and along the Caprivi and maybe through South Luangwa and then come across.
Yeah, that's a good route. A lot of people also take the route through Botswana and then come in via the Bulawayo Road.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
You're going to see her soon, Nick. She's on her way. All right, let's see. Anybody else?
I see Heike Henderson has another question. Go ahead, unmute. You may unmute, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Just another quick one. I remember east of Mana, there is this Sapi area, I think. And when I've been there, I was told that there are less animals than in the park, in the Mana Pools Park. Did that change since then? I mean, like in the last 2 or 3 years, that animals moved back into that area too? I mean, as you just said, that's why I thought of it. Since you have this camp in the south of Mana, animals return, elephants coming back. Is that the same to the east of Mana Pools, to the Mozambique border?
Yes, definitely. The Sapi area is bordered. There's a whole of Chori and Dandi further east before you get to Mozambique. So that's got a big cushion before it reaches Mozambique. The guys in Dandi take a lot of the brunt from the poachers from Mozambique. But Sapi hasn't been a hunting area now since 2016, and the game is coming back, getting more habituated to people. There's safari camps there now. But these things take time. There's especially with the elephant, with their long memories, they remember the days that when they was hunting there. It's just a matter of time before the game really settles down and becomes habituated like it is in Mana. But it'll get better every year.
But they haven't been there because there was hunting before and poaching, most probably.
Well, yeah, there's animals throughout the Zambezi Valley. So as we mentioned earlier, there were 20,000 elephants in the Zambezi Valley. There were 12,000 in 2014, and since then the numbers have grown up again. We're not sure what they are, but they've definitely increased. So, you know, there's only 3,000 in Manapools. The other 9,000 elephants in the Zambezi Valley live in what were previous hunting areas. And like I mentioned earlier, like Sapi is now non-hunting, and Rifa, where Himmersbach is non-hunting. So, but for those animals to become habituated like they are in Mana will take quite a few years.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Nick, that was a great talk, and it's so good to see you again. Do you have enough rangers to work on your conservancy, or are you always looking for rangers to add? And how long does a ranger usually stay in the employment?
Like I mentioned, we work with national parks rangers. We do have our own scouts also, which do help national parks, and it does relieve them of the need to have more rangers, because to become a national parks ranger takes many months of training, and there's just a very slow through flow of rangers in national parks. So what we're ending up doing is hiring our own scouts and supplementing where there's a shortage of rangers in certain areas, then we try to make that up.